Hello everyone. Today we're going to be learning about binary decoders. So a binary decoder takes a binary input and converts it to its corresponding decimal output. Now the decoders we're going to be looking at today are what are called n to 2 to the n decoders, where n represents the number of bits you have in your binary input. So let's say we have a 3-bit binary input. That means that we're going to have 2 to the 3 outputs, or 8, which therefore means that we're working with a 3 to 8 decoder. All right, so let's look at some decoder examples here. So here's a 1 to 2 decoder. On the left-hand side, we have our binary input, and you'll notice we only have one input pin, meaning that there's only one bit in our binary input. Now on the right-hand side, you'll see two output pins labeled D0 and D1, where D0 represents decimal 0 and D1 represents decimal 1. So if we input a 0 on our S0, which is binary 0, our output is going to be decimal 0, meaning that the D0 pin will be high, or logic 1, and the D1 pin will be off, or logic 0. Now on the flip side, if we input a 1 or binary 1, our D1 pin needs to be on, or logic 1, and our D0 pin should be off, or logic 0. Okay? Now if we take a look at a 2 to 4 decoder, again, we have our binary input. However, this time we have 2 bits, where S0 is the rightmost bit, or the least significant, and S1 is the leftmost bit, or the most significant. And with 2 bits, we know that we can represent numbers 0, 0 through 1, 1, or 0 to 3, hence why we have D0 through D3 as our outputs. So going through the inputs and outputs here, if we input 0, 0, that's binary 0, so our output should reflect that in decimal, meaning that D0 pin is going to be on, and all the other pins are going to be off. Now you'll notice for these active high decoders, only one decimal output pin can be high at a time, which makes sense, right? Because there's no possible input that can result in us needing to represent decimal 2 and 1. It's either one or the other, right? So moving on, if we input 0, 1, or 1 in binary, our decimal 1 pin will be on because we're representing 1 in decimal, and all the other decimal outputs will be 0. Now if we input 1, 0, or 2 in binary, our D2 pin will be on, and all the other pins will be off. Okay? And lastly, if we input 1, 1, or 3, D3 should be on, and all the other decimal output pins should be off. Okay? Now hopefully you're starting to see a trend here. Here you've got our last decoder, a 3 to 8. We've got 3 input bits, S0 being the rightmost, S1, and then S2 being the leftmost. And again, we can represent numbers 0, 0, 0 through 1, 1, 1, or 0 through 7. And you can see that reflected on the decimal outputs, D0 through D7. Okay, so if we input 0, 0, 0, or binary 0, the D0 pin should be on, and all the other pins should be off. Okay, now if we input 0, 0, 1, or 1 in binary, our decimal 1 pin should be on, and again, all other pins should be off. Now the same pattern holds if we input 2 in binary, we're going to output 2 in decimal. If we input 3 in binary, we're going to output 3 in decimal. 4 results in 4. 5 results in decimal 5 being high. 6 results in decimal 6 being high. And 7 results in decimal 7 being high. So again, hopefully you see a pattern here. Only one output pin is going to be high at a time, and all others are going to be low. Now, there's one final topic we need to talk about, and that's active low decoders. So we've been looking at active high decoders, where if we input, say, 0, 0, our D1 pin will be high. Now, what's the difference between an active low and an active high? Well, all that's different is if we input 0, 0, and this should be D0, sorry, our D0 pin will be 0. So active high, meaning that whatever pin, output pin is active, will be 1, whereas active low means that whatever output pin is active will be 0 instead of 1. Okay, so if we go back up here, if this was active low instead of active high, for the input 0, 0, 0, D0 would be 0, and all of the other pins would be 1. Moving on to 0, 0, 1, if we input 1 in binary, all of these pins will be 1, and our D1 pin will be 0. Okay? So hopefully you see the difference between the two. It's just a matter of what is considered to be active or on.